One of the big things I realized, authenticity is key. If you're just going to sell a product, no one really cares. But if you're going to connect with someone on a personal level, I think it's really important for them to quietly build up trust in you that you know what you're talking about.
He had everything, the career, the money, the London skyline view. But every day felt the same, numb, empty, pointless.
If people don't resonate with your message, the quicker you can make them realize whether you're someone they want to spend their time with or not, you're doing them a favor because they don't waste their time with you and they can go off and find somewhere else.
Anthony's story isn't just about success, it's about survival. About the moment a man looks in the mirror and admits, I've been living someone else's life.
The media is there to create a sense of dread, of permanent dread. It's not there to inform you. It's not there to enlighten you. It's there to give you news stories. That aligned with the television programming. Ultimately, it's up to the man. He's got to decide. You can provide all these men's group.
If you've ever wondered what happens when men wake up, when they stop coasting and start leading,
My question is always, instead of just going on about men are really lonely, what about you? It's up to you to fucking sort it out yourself. You don't have to be lonely. That's your decision.
Have you ever wondered what masculinity even is in the modern era? Are you ready to move beyond the macho bully or the soy boy archetypes? I'm Marc Azoulay, and this is the Men's Therapy Podcast. Together, we'll explore how neuroscience, Jungian psychology, and Buddhist philosophy can transform your life, your marriage, and your business. Are you ready to deep dive into the minds of men? Let's begin. Hello, welcome back to the Men's Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Marc Azoulay, and I'm here with Anthony Astbury. He is the founder of the Whole Man Academy and the author of the book, Ignite. He's worked with men for years, and I'm excited to have you on the show.
Thanks, Mark. It's always good to connect with guys. I mean, this is one big thing about podcasting is that I would say it's changed my life because you can connect with men all across the world, which you would probably never, ever have met or connected with maybe another way. And you get a chance to have a mildly deep conversation for an hour or two that you would not have ever had another time. So it's a pleasure to be on and talk about men's stuff.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I have the same experience. It's like there's so much more of us out there than I thought that there were. I'm doing the show for a while, and we're trying to be kind of, anti-manosphere in a way, or like providing like a different narrative. And there's like a lot of us out there doing it. So it's always been inspiring.
I think that's important because, I've been doing this for, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but, 2018 was the first men's event I did. So, I feel like I've done my time and, learned a lot as I'm sure you have. And what's been great to see over the years has been more and more guys starting things. The big problem with a lot of guys is they don't see it through. They'll do it for a while. And I get it. It can be hard work and getting guys to come to events. And, life gets in the way. They might have kids or church or whatever work going on. And I kind of see it that, it wasn't about trying to grow really big, really quickly. It was about building a network and a community. So yeah, it'd be good to get into all of that.
Totally. Yeah, I've had the same experience. It's just like consistency. I mean, my first retreats had like 2 people, but it's like you have to just like keep hosting them, keep running it. And then I think, men will show up and they need that kind of secure base.
That's the familiarity of some of the guys, I'm pleased to say, came to the first event in 2018 and are still part of my network. And I'm sure, in the last, where are we now, like last 4 or 5 years, it felt like the world has become slightly more, when I say divided, I have a strong belief the media push that divide a lot. But what that's meant is that, it's not always easy if you have different opinions on, could be politics or anything else, to connect with everybody. But my big thing is about finding the others, finding the guys that it's not necessarily they agree with everything you say, but they're on that same trajectory of they're not offended by everything. They want to do well. They want to provide for their family and their kids and their parents and their community. And it's so much more fun hanging around with guys like that, to be honest.
Totally. Yeah. Right. I mean, guys that are like on that self-improvement journey and that like, want to show up and do the work. And this is that base level of respect. Because I agree. I think that like respect and compassion has just completely fallen off, where it's all just about judgment and, blame and shame and all that kind of stuff. I'm curious, like, how do you build that into the work that you do?
Yeah, I think and maybe it sounds obvious, but one of the big things I realized, and I was guided by men who are, have much either bigger audience than me or have done a lot more in this space with putting out, and I know the word authenticity maybe gets bandied around a lot, but it is key to, if you're just going to sell a product, that no one really cares whether there's a background story or not. I get emails from the company that sell water butts. I couldn't give a shit whether what their views are on things. But if you're going to connect with someone on a personal level because you want life help, life advice, or you just want to be part of them, I think it's really important for them to quietly build up trust in you that you know what you're talking about, you're a trustworthy guy. And that's why for me, putting out content, I know people have a love-hate relationship with social media. Um, I have problems with social media in the way that it can manipulate people, but I see it as a tool. And as you'll know, it's a tool like, if you have too much water, it will kill you. If you don't have any water, it will kill you. For me, it's like social media is great for business, connecting with men all across the world and sharing my thoughts, ideas, opinions, etc. And that's where I found the more I put out the way I think, the more you will, repel the people that don't resonate with you, and the more you will attract the people that will. And in a way, there's no easier free way to do that than just using social media. And I've had people before, that have come to some events and then just not like either my opinions or even some of the guests that have come have spoke about things to do with mindset resilience, and some people haven't liked it. And I'm like, great, it's really healthy. We don't have to all agree on everything. So, for me, it's about, I put as much out there in the world as I can, that I feel is relevant. And therefore, again, you will be polarizing to some extent, not to try and be, not to be divisive in some respect, but to say, look, this is where I am. These are my beliefs. If you're with me, you're with me. And if you're not, go and find someone else. And the quicker, I don't know if you know who Garrett J. White is, who runs Wake Up Warrior. Um, I was on a call with him, and an event that he ran, and it was 2 years ago, I think, 1.5 years ago. And of course, I'm in the UK, so it started at 4 o'clock in my afternoon. It went till 2 in the morning, 4 days in a row. But his big thing there was, be as polarizing as possible, as quickly as possible. And the tweak to the mindset there for people that think, oh, I don't want to be polarizing. You say, listen, if people don't resonate with your message, especially as a man who they want to improve all the things that men might, then the quicker you can make them realize whether you're someone they want to, spend their time with or not, you're doing them a favor because they don't waste their time with you and they can go off and find somewhere else. And I love that as a flip to, people worrying about being polarizing. Say, do it to help the person that you're either drawing them in or pushing them away, basically.
Yeah, and I think as men, we respect that, right? Like you're saying, I don't have to agree with you, but as long as there's that basis level of respect and decorum, it's all good. Like debate is what makes us stronger. And I do think a lot of people either play it safe or they just try to do people pleasing. And they're from like a scarcity mindset of like, oh, I don't want to turn away anybody or I don't want to have an opinion. But then you just get lost in the crowd. I mean, you don't stand out. And it's not helpful. It's just not helpful if like you're just agreeing with everybody. I mean, my industry as a therapist, like a lot of therapists live that way and work that way. And we're trying to do something very different where we actually have opinions about, masculine and feminine energy. We have opinions about what makes a good man versus a bad man. We have opinions about like what guys need to focus on to make their relationships and their mental health better. Like we have a stance, which is, it's so rare. It's so rare in the wisdom of mental health industry.
I'd rather spend time with someone that I didn't fully agree with, but they took a stance on something, than spend time with someone that can't have an opinion on anything. Because it does, vanilla living does become a bit boring. And I was going to ask you actually, with therapy, is it purely men you work with, or is it a mixture? And if so, what would be the percentage mixture male to female?
Oh, it's all men. It's all men. So kind of our therapy, yeah, we're all male counselors and work with all male clients. So we're like really differentiating ourselves in that way. And speaking of polarizing, when I launched this business like 4 years ago, I got blasted where they're like, oh, you're, discriminating against women. You are just like, you're denying people service. You're not allowing people access to mental health care. And I'm like, there are so many other services that specialize in all these other things. But you go out there and you say you want to specialize in men, and it's a, firing squad. It was crazy how much negativity I got in the beginning.
And it's a topic that you could do a whole podcast on, but we found it's interesting how I was speaking to someone recently who their partner, who's female, goes in to do corporate events, and said that the corporate are lapping up the women's events, but have a lot less appetite for the men's events. No surprise there. And I always think that's funny how people talk about trying to be desperate to be inclusive, And actually people are inclusive until they hear an opinion they don't like, or, something that doesn't fit with their narrative. So yeah, for me, I've done a lot of corporate events. I've spoken at a lot of the banks like Barclays Bank, Credit Suisse, Lloyd's Bank. I've spoken at Spotify, lots of big companies. And it was great to see that a lot of those companies were realizing there is a need for talks for men. There is a need for talk for fathers. There is a need for talk for women. It could be on women's issues. It could be on menopause. It could be all different things, but it's okay to kind of niche down. We're all told in business, niche down. And then when you do, some people don't like it. So, as you and I know, it's, I know my specific man who I'm talking to. And if anybody else finds that valuable, great, but I couldn't give a shit whether they do or not. I know my avatar and I talk to the men there who resonate deeply with what I say because I understand them, and everybody else that comes along is a bonus.
Yeah, tell me more about that. I mean, from looking at your website, kind of the surface level thing I got is like the guy that like looks good on paper, but is feeling empty or lonely or, desperate on the inside. But can you really like unpack that? Because I imagine they're listening to this show.
Again, I love talking about this stuff because I don't talk because I think about it. I know about it because I lived that and I saw men living that, and I have worked with lots of men that have lived that. And take me for example. I worked in the city for nearly 20 years in London as a trader, so in the financial markets as a trader, primarily to start with, and then a broker. And I would say I was a much better broker than a trader because I was never interested in the numbers. I realized I was interested in the relationship with the people behind the numbers. And that's where I saw a lot of guys that obviously earned good money. And let's just pick like 100,000. I mean, 100,000 doesn't get you, it doesn't buy you a car or a week shopping these days with inflation. And what I saw, I mean, for myself, I'd worked in that industry and I kind of got to that mid to late 30s and thought, is this it? I enjoyed it for a period. So it's not pretending that a lot of guys don't just go straight to a job they hate. But what you can find is, as it could be sadly with a marriage, but with a career, with a business, with anything, you might do it for a decade or 2 decades, and it just starts to get boring, monotonous, Groundhog Day. So I started looking around and realizing that, let's pretend I was nearly 40, but you were still looking at another 20 years of doing that until I retire. And I just thought that just doesn't work for me. That coincided with I'd started doing obstacle course racing, and the US is much bigger than the UK in that. But I'd started going to personal development stuff and meeting more guys that were interested in having an exciting life. And that didn't always mean monetarily, but I would always wager that for most of you, the more money you have, the more options for excitement you can have because you have the freedom not to have to work all the time and you can do more cool things. But I then was competing in the world championships out in Ohio, so in the US, and I got to that when I say elite level fitness for doing obstacle course racing. But alongside that, I was looking to optimize everything in my life. So obviously, not just your body, but your mindset and your network, which I think is, I probably didn't realize when I was younger how vital and crucial the right men around you are. You get some men that want to coast, and that's great. I think the world probably needs coasters, but you also, I'm sure you are as well. We have aspirations and we have drive and determination. So what I realized was that I needed to get more into personal development. So I went to the only thing that was around was Tony Robbins event. I mean, there was, as far as I know, there was nothing in London unless Tony Robbins events came over. So I went to Unleash the Power Within in London. I then signed up to Life and Wealth Mastery that was in Tenerife, and I went to Date with Destiny in Miami. And that, in a way, was the kind of the match that lit the fire inside me to look around. You met so many men and women, but men who were living life more on their terms. And it didn't mean that everything was perfect, and they all still had, I call them, silent struggles. But it just showed you a window to what was possible for men that were running businesses, making impact. And two other things, they had unlimited upside of earning, because when I worked in the city, and everyone I worked with, the most you were ever going to do was probably double your salary. So even if you were on 200 grand a year, I'm not saying that going to 400 isn't a bad thing, it isn't bad, but for me, you just thought, how much you're going to have to work, and you're never going to be able to even double your salary. Whereas these guys were working, having more impact, having a bit more freedom, and they didn't have to ask for time off from their boss, which, it depends what your values are, but if freedom's high. So in short, that's what got me kind of interested in personal development, interested in leaving the city. And, soon after that, I'd taken all of what I'd learned and thought, who do I know about? Who do I understand? Men who on paper have got the money, the car, the body, the townhouse, the job, the titles, but actually underneath part of you was kind of just fucking pissed off with where you were because you either wanted more monetarily as well as any more freedom, but also you just felt like you needed a bit more excitement because you didn't feel alive anymore doing your job. And, I sat for 200 hours a month sitting at my desk. And in a way, I realized that after a while that 200 hours a month, you think what else you could be doing with that time. And that took me to the first event in 2018. So I'll pass it back to you. But that's the kind of general story of why, a lot of men look successful, but are unfulfilled and or stressed and need that kind of a pivot, I call it a life pivot. But the options, especially in the UK, were and probably still are very limited for men.
Yeah, let's just dig more into that kind of quiet desperation you're talking about, because I think, like you said, a lot of guys feel that, and they feel like, yeah, I think it starts as like anger because they're like, I did everything right. I got the education, maybe I even have the family, I got the good job, but I just feel empty and numb and completely dissociated from my life. And I think it can quickly turn into self-destructive behavior, start drinking, start using drugs, start looking at porn, get divorced, like that's when they usually see me, right? Is like when they don't deal with it and it just becomes they're trying to be thrill seekers and find what they need. But how do we get into that? Because I think most young men are very ambitious, right? But then it seems like over time, 30s, 40s, into 50s, like the walls just start to close in
I
on a
I
lot of
think there's
guys.
multiple answers to that. What I've seen was for some guys, life kind of, again, we use the word coasting, but it becomes the trappings of success that once you get the job, you probably, the more money you earn, you probably work long hours. I mean, whether you're earning good or not, I know a lot of men that are working long hours now. So you get tired when you have kids. Now I have 3 kids, all boys who are 7, 5, and 2, who are, have just about gone to bed at 9 o'clock at night. And, kids are amazing, but they're also very challenging and tiring. And when you roll that together with, the way that the government manipulates things, so the cost of living stays high and interest rates and, all the other stuff we have to pay for, I think guys get ground down into the Groundhog Day existence and it can feel very hard to get out of it. Um, on the flip side, some of the guys I know that have got businesses, careers that are doing okay, you're kind of scared to burn it all down and start again and go off because your friends and family and everybody and society wants you to stay safe and just keep doing what you're doing. And it's very hard to think that you might have to dial back your lifestyle at your car and the kids at private school, to take a risk on something else. Um, I look at again, I often talk about the media because I think that plays a huge part in us as boys and then as men. That also, the media is there to create a sense of dread, of permanent dread. It's not there to inform you. It's not there to enlighten you. Certainly, it's not there to actually tell you the facts. It's there to give you news stories. That aligned with the tell lie vision that everybody watches television programming. It's called programming for a reason. Is that in the end, you can be so distracted by any other shit that they can think of to throw at you, like reality TV and arguing about politics and sport and what have you, that in the end, you wrap all that up. And most guys are just kind of swimming upstream just to stay afloat, let alone to have those thoughts of bettering themselves, which comes back to when you spend time with the right men say, stop fucking doing that and start doing this. Come with me on my journey. And it becomes exciting and a lot easier. Because if you're doing it on your own, the lone wolf concept sounds cool, but it's tiring. You put a group of 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 men around you who are like, Mark, fucking get up. Let's get to the gym. Come on. What's that work you said you were going to do? You said you would do it and you haven't. Why not? Stop with your shit excuses.
Yeah, and men need that, right? I mean, I think it's like we need that accountability. We need that tribe. We need that like, squadron, right? Like men gather in groups. We have for forever. And I agree. I mean, I think it's like media culture. I think the like, degradation of blue collar work, right? Like guys don't need each other. We don't work together in the same way. It's all just like, emails and computers and forms and files. Everything's like mediated by information that we don't actually have that like brotherhood that we've needed.
It's really important point you just made there because I would say in 2018, first event, and then I hosted about, I can't even remember, but between 10 and 12 events in London in 2019. And we were very lucky that several large organizations understood my concept and the idea behind it and said, listen, we think it's very important for men's groups to come together. We will give you some really cool event spaces in London for free, which, I could never have afforded at that point. We're talking thousands and thousands. And that really built a good momentum for me. And our biggest event, we had 65 guys come to in London and, had speakers and, I don't drink anymore, but we had really lovely, cocktails being made. And it was an exciting kind of aspirational event as opposed to sitting around in a shitty hotel room, or hotel conference room with the sticky carpet and the cold chairs. But what happened in 2020, of course, with lockdowns was it wiped out all of that momentum. And people listening were like, you can't buy momentum. You can't just get it back. You have to build momentum. And that was really hard for me because I'd worked really, really hard and I wasn't making any money from it at that point because you're trying to build the business, as it were. And then everything went to shit. And, 2020, the lie of, it'll only be 3 weeks to flatten the curve, which was just, a joke. And you think probably a year and a half before events started again. So, I like to talk about success because it's important. I also like to talk about times you found it really challenging because as we know, motivation can be around, but when you get massive knocks like that, it takes a huge kind of dent in your, in your entire plans. So I'm sure you've had probably big challenges as well, but it's a reminder that we all get them. It's just about how do you decide to react to them.
Yeah, and how did you decide to react to him? Because, yeah, I imagine that must have been a real slap in the face of, like, you're just running at full speed and then boom, brick wall.
I was lucky. I have had from around that time a couple of very good like business mentors, and one of them more in the kind of online digital space. Who, in a way, what helped was if you were going to have a call with them, and this is what I was advised. Anybody listening to this, when you've got problems, one thing you could do is imagine you're about to speak to someone who you respect and you feel is ahead of you in the game. And it could be someone that it could be someone you're never actually going to meet. They might not even be alive anymore. But the point is, imagine you're about to have that conversation with them. That in a way helps you do some self-analysis of your bullshit detector, because before you go on that call, you need to be clear on, what is working, what isn't working, and get your excuses ready. And we all know, I think, we've all got our own good excuses as to why we're not where we want to be. And some of them are valid, but they're still, there might be reasons. But I found it really helpful having some men to go to and talk to. And what we discussed very quickly was, like it or not, this lockdown stuff, the government clearly aren't going to roll it back very quickly. When you understood, what had happened beforehand and the agenda behind it, you realize this isn't going to stop for months, if not a long time. So you either pivot or you sit and cry and moan about it. And that's it. There's basically two choices. So I realized online was the only way, which I had always planned to start a podcast, which, you think now how big podcasts are. This was back in 2020. And I started it. And that in a way helped me start gaining that momentum again. And it deepened connections with men all across the world, from the US and from South Africa and New Zealand and all around Australia, places that I would never have met. And that enabled me to start building an online audience as well as a local one. So, in a way it was good because it forced me to do it. And for me, that was the only option really, because no one's going out anywhere. The media have done such a great job of scaring people from going and getting around anybody at all, that it was either online or nothing. And, I think now podcasts are an incredible vehicle, both mentally, physically, spiritually, everything, because you can connect with people, you can get ideas from people. And look at us two, we're chatting on for me, a Friday evening when, you'd never have had that chance to.
If you're enjoying the podcast so far, please hit the subscribe button and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us to reach more men and inspire them to become the best versions of themselves. Thank you for your support. And now back to the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's like, that's where the guys are, right? I mean, the guys are listening to podcasts and it's like, you're getting to them and you're, reaching them on their level, which I think is really critical. Again, especially in my industry, like therapists, like we're so introverted in so many ways and kind of elitist in many ways. And it's like marketing adverse. And it's like, yeah, you just got to get out there and like talk to the real people. That's what's necessary.
My view on therapy for men is that, again, it's like everything. Some guys might find it useless because it's a tool, and other guys will take massive value out of it. And I know some guys that have gone, and I would say it might be that the person you were speaking to wasn't the right fit for you. It could be that it wasn't the right time for you because you weren't prepared to open up. And other guys that have gone and said, wow, it's changed my world. So for me, I would say, because I get asked, what do you think about therapy for men? I'm like, what do I think about going to the gym? What do I think of anything? Some guys will love it. Some guys won't. I would say always try it. Like having a coach, try it. If it doesn't work for you, you've had a go. But if you feel you need to, but if you're strongly against it, then don't, because you shouldn't force yourself. But I feel it's important. And even when I'm doing coaching guys, I try and get them outside, go for a walk or up over the hills. Because it's like, we talk about men, building up using habits like, porn and eating and drinking and, sleeping around, doing whatever it is. I always see those as those coping mechanisms that are coping with the pressure that's building up inside a man. And that might be because of work or marriage or monetary issues, whatever. But if you can't find a way to let off steam, be it at the gym or just talking to people, at some point your fucking lid will blow, ultimately. And and I know, and I sadly know men who have taken their own life, decided that it is too much for them. That if you can catch a guy way before them and help him with strategies, mindset, tools, network, all those things, you can never stop a man if he really wants to kill himself. Let's be honest. That unless you're going to lock him up all the time or watch him the whole time. But ultimately, you know, you can do as much as you can to help guys. And I think when they're either struggling mentally or they're just like, I need some direction here and some help on strength of their body and mind, success, direction, connection, whatever. If you can get them outside and go for a walk, everything seems like a bit more relaxed. I don't know if you find that yourself.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, I think, and research backs this up, right? It's like men bond through activity and we bond through challenge, shared challenge. So even if something as simple as a walk around a lake, right, or in the park, like that's a challenge in some way, right? Like we're accomplishing a goal together. So yeah, I mean, we do retreats, we do community hikes, we do all that stuff because, even just sitting and having a conversation, like you and I can do it because it's our jobs. But for the average guy out there, like just sitting eye contact for 50 minutes is just like weird, right? Like we're like, well, what am I gonna talk about? Like, I'm good. So, I think, yeah, the, like, kind of doing activities together is how males bond. I'm curious because, in your story and your pillars, I know you just, outlined there real quick, like, I like that you focus on physical and financial too as a place to start because I feel like again, a lot of therapists or a lot of coaches like skip over that. Like I think we want to go straight to that emotional, straight to the trauma, or straight to the mindset, or like try to dig in as deep as possible. But I think for most guys, like we feel masculine, yeah, when we're making money, when we're being fit. So can you tell me about that? Really focusing on that foundation there.
Two ways for me. Let's take the physical first. When I was 20 or 21, I used to play football, but I didn't really go to the gym when I was that age because, to be honest, I was just busy having fun and going out drinking, chasing women and playing football. Like, what more do you need at that age? And I had a collapsed lung that's called a spontaneous pneumothorax, which meant my left lung collapsed. I thought I was having a heart attack because it's the same symptoms. You got pain in your chest, your left arm goes numb, you can't breathe. All sounds like a heart attack. Um, and long story short, I had a couple of nasty operations, but it meant I was unable to exercise at all for about 6 months, which as a guy that was really active and played a lot of football and athletics and everything was really, really hard. And in a way, what that got me into was during that time, I would start reading like Men's Health magazine. There was nothing else around really. I think it was Men's Health or Men's Fitness. That was probably it. And, I started devouring that information and I kind of wasted away because I was slim anyway. But what I then did was learn enough to be able to build back my body and way more. I added a lot more muscle, um, and, had a low body fat, a lot more muscle. So I was a lot stronger and capable. And you talked about, or you said the word capable, I think as well. during the time when I was weak, I was very incapable of doing much. I wouldn't, I had no strength. I was in pain. So I was worried if someone knocked into me because I'd been cut down this side. I was already worried my lung would collapse if I got out of breath. And I was a bit weak and pathetic. And I, very quickly wanted to push away from that to being a strong, build your shoulders back up, have muscles. And there's the old saying, do the curls for the girls. I wasn't just doing it to be strong. I wanted to look attractive for the type of girl that was into fitness and wanted to be around a man who took care of himself. And I've always been that through, I've been exercising today and do very much big home gym through to the world championships in obstacle course racing, because in a way, I don't think you really want to, but for me, the ideal man, if you're going to talk capability, you don't want to be very slim so you can run hundreds of miles because you've got no upper body strength, probably, no core strength. I don't even know core strength, you're not, look at a CrossFitter. You don't want to be super muscly because you can't run very far, and you might not be very supple and what have you. So in a way, the maybe slightly dialed back from a CrossFitter's body meant you could run a marathon if you really want to. You could, do 20 pull-ups. You could pick your child up and put them over your shoulder and run across a field, if you needed to get away from someone. You were capable, and that's where I wanted to build, what I know was a capable body, and I know how I felt. That was the important thing. When I was like that, I don't mean I could take anybody on in fighting way, but I knew I was rock solid and had that core of strength, that I had confidence. I then met guys that were either overweight and flabby or just weak, and they would ask you, what have you done? How'd you do that? And again, it wasn't about how I looked necessarily. It was about how I carried myself. And for them, they wanted that confidence. So I, pushed that through to all the guys in the whole man academy and say, listen, it's up to you. But do you think your community, your kids, your wife, and anybody else around you wants a weak, pathetic man, or do you think they want a strong, capable man? If you answer wrongly there, then you're probably not going to join my network. But if you go onto the money side, it won't. I would wager that, let's say, for argument's sake, you and I stood in front of 1 million men from all across the world now. I would guarantee that 95% of them all want more money. Fact. If not more. And even the guys I know that have got lots of money, because they're wise, they say, I'd love more money because I can do good shit with it. So for me, when I have an online quiz, which is, let's call it, a free tool, life evaluation tool. And it goes through health, fitness, mindset, career, what you eat, how you sleep, and money. And it's very important at the end. A lot of guys will say, yes, I want more money, because money is like fun tokens. If you've got low, you don't have to work for a fucking boss you hate. You don't have to worry about car payments. You don't have to worry about the government, taxing the shit out of everybody so much. So it's just as you said, it's very important. If you're physically, if you're strong, healthy, and fit, you've got a much better chance of living a good life, I think. And if you're financially secure, and you can already decide what your financial security is, it could be £1 million, it could be 10 million. And I've worked with guys that have lost loads of money, but they've got the drive and determination to build it back. I also know guys that have got millions and are totally despondent, lost, in despair. So we know it's not about the money, but the money is like a driver for different people to how important it is. It's a very, very interesting one to talk to. Like, big question is always, what's your relationship with money? And you see someone's eyes light up.
Yeah, well, because it's self-worth, right? Like you said, and it's freedom, it's independence. It's like not having to be a slave in many different ways, right? Like, it's very critical. And I like what you're saying about that internal sense of strength or internal sense of success, which I know are two of your pillars, right? Like, as men, we are always gauging that, right? Like, we're hierarchical animals, right? We're mammals, right? There's a pecking order. I think modern culture would say, oh, everyone's equal and it's fine and it's all love. But no, we are very hierarchical, very competitive creatures, right? We're apex predators. So like, we are aware of that. And if we are low on the totem pole, it's going to start to degrade our mental health.
I think it's important, like you said, I understand from two sides of it. I spoke on a podcast the other day where I said, let's say with kids, you don't want kids to only feel like winning is the most important thing, because you want them not to have a link of their self-worth to whether they did or didn't win. and mummy and daddy's love, but also you don't want them to be taught the whole time. It doesn't matter if you don't win, finishing 30s. You're like, that doesn't work when you go for a fucking job interview. That doesn't work when you get older and you come on the sports field, because if you're shit, you just won't get picked. So I would say the other key thing for me, kind of going back to physicality, was I had a newfound level of appreciation for the ability to play high level, as it was football. Because when I had my collapsed lung, towards the end of it, they said to me, the experts said, you probably won't play like, very competitive football again. And I said, yes, I will, but I could have been wrong. But after all those months off, I missed football so much because it was important to me that when I went back to playing, I was number one in training, for performance and attitude and everything. I won player of the year and all that kind of stuff, because every time I went on that pitch, I thought I might have lost that. And this is what I'm trying to instill in men also is, I mean, we talk about, pillars of a whole man academy, but for me also, appreciation for what you've already got is not always about what it's great to work towards more. But sometimes I said to a guy the other day who was having a tough time, I said, look, you've got a fairly well paid job. You've got your health. You've got somewhere to live. You've got, sons who love you. You've got a good network of friends. Some other stuff's going on that's hard. And he was like, yeah, I really needed to hear that.
So cool. Let's go.
Yeah, let me ask you this, right? Like, do you think that men need that crash out or that rock bottom, or Robert Blythe, with him tells like the ashes phase, right? Do you think men need that to grow? I do personally.
It's a really good question, because I again, going back to podcasts, because I've done so many. I'm sure like you as well, there'd be conversations with different men that there'll be one thing that stood out, and it was a guy who's actually from the UK but he lives in the US, called Neil Kramer. And he lives in Washington State, which I know is different to Washington, which I wasn't sure about because I'm crap at geography. I remember during the call, we were talking about why, in a way, people need to wake up in the world, but you could attribute it back to men. Why don't they make a change? And I said, because life hasn't got painful enough yet. Because, as you know, let's say we pick a pretend person called John, who, is saying, oh, I want to leave my career and stuff. If he's got money in the bank and, he's got a 2-year contract, he can just plod along. Whereas the best thing, rightly or wrongly, that you might think happened is that they call him one day and says, we're cancelling your contract, you're out in a week. Suddenly, the shit hits the fan. The wife is like, what are we going to do? The kids are hungry, the car payments, the kids are at private school, the mortgage. And suddenly you think, oh, shit, I need to get my act together. So in a way, so many men, which is nice in some respects, so many men are comfortable that they don't need to take drastic action yet, which kind of can be a blessing in disguise. But for some, life needs to come crumbling down quickly often for them to finally wake the fuck up and be like, now I'm going to take massive action. And I think therapy can be as much of that as anything else, because often therapy, men will wait till things have got really bad to say, I need to go to therapy or get a coach or go to the doctor or whatever. Whereas instead I look at it like, these are all good tools, that it's like a full body massage. If you could go for a massage and see the osteopath like every few months, they'll just realign you and get you back. Same for therapy or coaching or consultancy, mention anything. If you can access all of these tools for men, like, why wouldn't you? It's a no-brainer.
Right. Yeah, but I agree. I think people need that crash, and then they start to value it more. But yeah, I mean, people come to me, at the end of a divorce or getting laid off or a drug addiction or, domestic violence or whatever. It's like when
Yes.
they've hit that
Now,
bottom.
really need help.
But then, yeah, they can again. Yeah, exactly. Now I need help. Where it's like, shit, I wish I talked to you,
Yeah.
fucking 2 years ago. It'd be a
But
lot
Mark, you
easier.
just said, and I think it's important
yeah.
to touch on this one, because I'm in marriage. I'm a really strong believer that ideally people should meet their one partner and stay with them for life. That's the idealistic way. But then we have to be realistic that, unfortunately, people do drift apart. And as I know with a career that I loved at one point, you could have it where you're with someone for 5, 10, 15, 20 years and you just grow apart. And I think that's one of those that men will seek help at the gym. They'll employ a personal trainer very quickly, and they might go to an osteopath for their bad back, and they'll go to a financial consultant for their pension, what have you. But if you've got marriage issues, there's always two ways I look at it, or two questions. One, are you showing up as the man you know you could be? And I guarantee you, every fucking time it will be no. Then the question is, what does that look like? Forgetting what the partner does or how she's acting in any way, because you can't control that. Again, are you taking care of yourself? Are you being a man that spends time with the family? Are you doing the things that you would think that would help it become harmonious? Because a lot of other things can be fixed easily, but once a marriage goes belly up, especially if you've got kids or it can become very expensive, that can be a absolute, there's a term called a clusterfuck. Like, often if you've got young kids, the wife will get awarded the kids. You'll have to move out. You'll have had a house that you're paying the mortgage together, maybe, or maybe you're the sole provider or the primary earner in the money. Then, of course, you're going to have to move out. You're going to have to rent somewhere yourself, pay the money to her as well, pay your own living fees. All your money's disappeared. You're only seeing your kids once a week. You get fucking depressed. And you go back to, well, 3 years ago, when you either fucked your secretary or you just started spending more time doing other stuff, if you'd have taken action then, none of this would have happened. But by then, as you know, it's too late. And then they're knocking on your door going, can you fix this for me? And you go, I can help you, but it's too late.
Like, roll up your sleeves is gonna be a long time, But I agree. I mean, it's like we don't have good models. I think most men out there that look at their parents' relationship and are like, "Wow, I don't want that." Maybe it's like loveless, sexless, there isn't much fun or play, it's all business, right? I think the, boomer generation was a lot like that. And then we're looking at like, okay, media, like you're talking about, it's like, okay, movies or porn, you know, and those are both fantasies. So it's like, this is your relationship, one of the most important things in your life. But I agree, men don't seek help for that until it's horrible, until the papers are on their desk or until they're at that ultimatum. I would say a majority of my guys call it 7 out of 10. Like they're in therapy because their wives are like, go to therapy or else I'm going to divorce you. Like that is the number one reason guys come to the work for me. Right. And I wish, that's why I'm curious your experience. Like, I wish we could get guys doing more self-development just for the sake of self-development. Like you said, just like take your life seriously, and like access all these great guys, you and I included, that like want to help and want to mentor and, all these communities that are out there. But there's just so many guys that are alone. And it seems like they just like need to get in that car accident, that life clusterfuck before they reach out. And that's a big question I just have all the time of like, how do you get to them early?
Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you wanted to open up, but you were afraid that it wouldn't be taken well? You ask yourself, what's the point? Nothing's going to change anyway. So you do what you always do. You push it down, numb out the pain with a drink, a night out, or pornography. I've been there myself, and I know that men lack the outlets for emotional expression, which is why I founded Men's Therapy Online, a healing hub for men's mental health. If you've been knocked on your ass or just crave meaningful connection, join Men's Therapy Online, a community of men who just get it. We offer individual therapy, men's groups, and powerful retreats, all led by licensed therapists. At Men's Therapy Online, we will help you to get back on your feet and take your life to the next level. Start your journey today at menstherapy.online.
I would say something extremely masculine here to say what I was doing earlier when I had this thought, but I was busy hanging the washing out on the line because my partner had taken now 3 boys out, and it's lovely and sunny at the moment in the UK, which is, whilst they're manipulating the weather, they've allowed us to have some nice sunny days for a while. And whilst I was there, I was in my head, I spent a lot of time on LinkedIn, and I'm trying to grow my audience on there. But I see a lot of posts, which is great, saying about men that are lonely, especially when they get to kind of midlife, because working from home, which is going to push people into a contactless society, unfortunately. Also, there's just a lot more digital around. So even if they're not working from home, they might be able to flexi work, and a lot of it is on Teams. Also, you've got men who either have been made redundant or are working nights. There's all different ways that men might feel like they don't have time to go out and do stuff, which could lead to loneliness. But and it's great to open that conversation, but ultimately it's up to the man. He's got to decide. You can provide all these men's groups and what have you, but my question is always, instead of just going on about, oh, men are really lonely and they should talk more, what about you say, well, it's up to you to fucking sort it out yourself. Like that's the thing. We can talk about it and we can provide events and, online stuff, but you have to make a decision. You don't have to be lonely. That's your decision. And not everybody wants to hear that, but I look at all the guys in my, I run it's called The Network, and there's about 20 members, which is just a membership. And the guys get support from me. They're all, some of them run $1 million businesses or £1 million businesses. Others work for huge companies. Others work for our health service, a real mixture. Others are ex-police. One's in Bali who works for OpenAI, really interesting mix of guys. But they've all taken the decision to pay a small amount of money, which works out at about £1 a day, to join a network of men all across the world who all help each other. And there you go. They, if they were lonely before, they're not now. And they've now got all us guys in their corner, and they'll listen to this podcast because I'll have introduced them to you through my network. And, for £1 a day type stuff, then they've made a decision not to. So it's important for people to realize that you have to take ownership of where you are in life. It doesn't matter what's gone on before, what you've fucked up, what has or hasn't gone well, to be honest. I don't really care. It's for me now, what's your attitude? Do you want to improve yourself? What are your intentions? You're actually going to do something about it. And the biggest thing for me is the word trajectory. Even if you're broke and your marriage has fucking gone and your kids have left and you've lost your house, if you feel like you're on the right trajectory and you're looking up and you're planning to do stuff, great. People want to spend time with you. If your trajectory is going down, you either do something about it quickly, or you'll reap what you sow.
Yeah, well, so tell me about some of the barriers, right? Because what I see in what you're saying, I see this too. It's like a lack of humility, and I think like a victim mentality. I think a lot of men get stuck there, and I think we don't want to say that we're lonely, or we don't want to submit to like joining a men's group or something. There's like this like weird false pride for like no reason, But I'm curious, like what barriers you see to guys getting out, because like there is stuff, right? And whether it's like an organization like yours or mine, or it's like a CrossFit gym, or a volunteer organization, or your local, like, I don't know, Rotary Club or whatever. Like there's so much stuff actually there all the time.
Several points. One, it's a poor excuse, but money is often bandied around. I can't afford it. Like, okay, but there's loads of free stuff. And my question is, and I'd love to talk about AI as well because I think that's going to shape everybody's lives in the next decade plus.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's here already, right? I
that's
mean,
it.
like
So
it's
you can't,
happening
it's not
now.
far
Yeah,
away,
only
unless
gonna
they
get
take over the
crazier. Yeah,
world and cyber
yeah.
down or whatever it is, which comes back to, are you happy with the life you've been living before AI kills us all? But I think for a lot of people, you can use excuses like you're busy, and you can use excuses like I haven't got the money and I don't know where to go and what have you. And you're like, cool, but have you tried, like, you could go to AI and say, in the UK, give me the top 100 men's options, and what's the nearest one and how much they cost. And you could just do that and it would do it in 3 seconds. I mean, I did it the other day I was interested. So, you've got no excuse. I think pride is one where kind of guys are like, oh, I don't know what, I don't know, I don't know why I'm going to it. I feel silly. And I understand that. That's why I try and put out content like this with you and I, because if it was me, I'd want to listen to Mark talking for 5 hours before I thought, actually, he's talking my language. And I've had men come to my events or sign up for coaching with me because they'll say, I heard you on a podcast, listened to you for an hour, 2 hours, and thought, yeah, actually, he's someone I want to spend time with. So I understand guys need to do the homework. The other one, of course, is when I say society pulling you back. Even when I said to some ex-colleagues, oh, I'm doing events for Men in London, a really cool venue with like ex-world champion kickboxers and ex-footballers who were doing talks and ex-special forces, they still were like, oh, what's that all about? Oh, a load of rubbish. And I understand it because it's kind of still quite rare, although it is growing. And you're going to have, sadly, your wife or your kids or your friends or your parents or your colleagues, it's still that bit like, oh, I'm going to a men's thing. What's that? So I understand there's that barrier. But ultimately, like you said, it pisses me off. There was I understand some men are having challenges. I get it. And I've had challenges myself. I've had heartbreak. I've had I've fucked things up with money before. I've been made redundant twice. I've had loved ones die, as we all do. All the things going to happen. But I understand that all these things are happening, and I get to decide how I react to them. But for a lot of guys, what I see is they haven't realized how much power they have yet. They are just kind of letting life dictate them, and they're watching hours of TV and hours of sport instead of working on themselves. And one day, hopefully, they'll realize this is all up to me. I can chuck my TV away. I can stop paying for fucking cabled sport or whatever it is, which is using up my money. I can stop eating shit. I can stop scrolling late at night. I can stop wanking, watching porn. I can stop doing all this stuff, but no one can stop it for you, basically. And once a man realizes he's on the right trajectory with his own power, I think that's when things change.
Yeah, once that flywheel starts to get rolling and you realize like, "Oh my god, I can be, master and commander of my own life." And something I say with my guys all the time is like, for me, the difference between like a boy and a man is a man takes responsibility for his life, you know? And it's like, yeah, you may have some shit cards, most of us do, but like you can decide how you wanna play them, and you can decide how you want to like build strategies that take those into consideration on how to play the best game you can.
That also comes down to delivery. Deliveroo, that's a food delivery company. Delivery, I should say. I'm sure, like you have, even in you could say that you were doing therapy or coaching or mentorship, I guess, because it's about how you deliver it. But some people won't like the way you deliver it, and I like to think of myself as I'm friendly and approachable, but I have a no nonsense attitude. And for me, some guys won't like that because they want the arm around the shoulder, and I'm capable of doing that. But someone else sniffing out your bullshit and saying, "So you say that you haven't had any time to go to the gym this week. I totally understand. You're really busy. Tell me about that." And they'll say, "Yeah, I couldn't go Monday. Oh, I couldn't go Tuesday. Wednesday, I was tired." I'm like, "Cool, okay, I didn't have time. Did you see the match on Tuesday night?" They're like, "Oh yeah, yeah, I saw the game. Yeah, that was really good. The 2 hours of sitting watching football." I'm like, "Cool. I'm not saying you shouldn't watch football, but you could have got a kettlebell and you could have said, 'You know what? For 45 minutes, I'm going to work out at home.'" I mean, as one example, or you could have just not watched football and you could have gone to the gym or gone out for a run or whatever. But the point is, it's a bullshit excuse that you did. It's not you didn't have time. You decided other things took priority over it. And years ago in the UK, we have what's called Super Sunday, which means basically now, the powers that be have managed to put football on every single night and every Saturday and 3 times on a Sunday. So you can just sit there and just watch sport and vegetate all day.
If you're an addict, you can get your
That's
hit
it. And
anytime
obviously,
you want,
then you
yeah.
could go on YouTube and watch highlights and everything. But I had it before where you'd
Yeah,
say to a guy, "Oh,
yeah.
did you get that thing done at the weekend?" "No." And you'd be like, "Oh, right." And then you realize they watch 2 games of football. And you're like, "Okay, but it'd only take you 1 hour." So you could have said, "I'll just watch 1 game of football and I'll get my shit done." But now you're stressing on a Sunday night and Monday morning because you haven't done the work you said you would do to become the man you could be, because you prioritized watching men who are fitter than you, faster than you, earn more than you, and probably have a lot more sex than you, running around chasing a fucking ball instead of doing what you should have done. And some guys will go, "You're right." And you're like, "Cool, now we can work together."
Yeah, I think, man, we need that. Like you said, we need that, like, penetrating attitude that, like, cuts through the bullshit, right? And I think a guy that's able to take in feedback, that's what makes a man, right? Because again, you're not doing because 'cause you're trying to, like, hurt his feelings or, like, make him feel bad. You're trying to be like, "Hey, here's the mirror," right? Like, if you wanna do something with it, go ahead, but your job to keep holding that mirror up to them so that it does become a little bit uncomfortable so they do take action. Because I agree, I think men need pain. Like, I think we're motivated by pain and by challenge. We're not motivated as much by, like, validation and love and compassion and all that stuff. Like, we need, like we're
We
fighters. We need to
I
fight
love what you
for
just
our
said then about
lives.
reflecting, in a way, reflecting pain forward. If you say to a guy, "Listen, you're doing this, this, and this now," that might seem fine, but in 6 months' time, or a year, or 2 years, or 5 years, if you're still doing that, where's that going to be? And quite a few years ago, there was a guy I was talking to who was overweight, and long story short, he wanted to lose weight, but he wasn't really putting any effort. So it's actually quite easy to lose weight if you eat the right things, uh, exercise more, move more during work time. And the way I realized was that you could tell him that over and over and over again, and probably had done, but it wasn't registering. And I said, "Okay, let's go to a painful experience instead of." Let's say, and he had 2 small kids at the time, 2 sons. I said, if you're in a park and you see your youngest 4-year-old running across the park to a main road, I, even at 47 as I am now, can get up and sprint after that child and hopefully grab them. But if you're a fat fuck and you're breathing out your ass and your jeans are falling around your ass crack because you're so fat and you can't get halfway there and that child gets run over, would you say, do you know what? I gave myself the best possible chance of saving that child? Or would you sit and think, if I hadn't been fat, I'd have saved them? Now, it sounds harsh, but some people need to project that instead of just saying you're a bit flabby, you need to sort your shit out, and you say, how would you feel? And if you're not fussed about it, then stop fucking moaning. But if you can think, oh my God, like that, I would never feed myself. Good. So every morning when you can't be asked to get out of bed and go to the gym, have that in your mind. Have a picture of a fucking car or something on your um, mirror in your bathroom or on your kitchen as a trigger to reminder. This is why I'm going to work out. Because otherwise, it's easy just to play small and stay fat.
For sure. Yeah. And just keep the inertia going. So, we're nearing the end of our show, but I want to ask you kind of a final question, which is like, what do you think is modern masculinity? I asked that question to a fair number of our guests. Like, it's a huge topic of debate. I think you see every side of the political spectrum has a very strong opinion, a very different way of looking at it. But for you, like, what is the modern man?
I think I see there's a difference between if you assessed what that answer is online, because there's a lot of vocal people who would have men be weak and soft and just kind and everybody wins, which, as we know, doesn't work. I see a move back more towards there's a craving for the traditional sense of masculinity. And I enjoy talking about it in one way. And also, when I say I get bored of talking about it, it's because you and I know that everybody's view of it is going to be different. And no one is right or no one is wrong. But you know that some people over there will say, I don't agree that the man should be put pressure on himself to be the provider because it hurts his mental health. Cool. But let's face it, the mother is her biggest ability is nurturing babies. It's not going into a fucking boardroom. Not to say that women can't do that, but primarily, I know from having kids that babies want mummy when they need love. They're going to get love from daddy, but babies want mummy and kids. So for me, the traditional masculine man is a man who's strong because he can protect his wife. He can also recover from illness and fitness. He's capable. He should be able to fix things and he should be able to articulate well and build a business. Now, I laugh because I'm not very good at fixing things. It's something I need to work on. But he's capable. He's strong. He's also has a nurturing side. And for me, I can switch on to being, reading my little boys a story of a night and cuddling them. But if someone was outside who wanted to try and break into a house, I'm capable of flipping into a very different mode, which I wouldn't want my kids to see. But I think all men should have that flip switch, which, hopefully you never have to use, but you fucking will when you need to. So there's always going to be a broad spectrum. I think for most men, we want to be left alone. We want to raise our family, spend time with our loved ones. We want to build something that we feel is worthwhile, if it's in a career, if it's a job or if it's in a business. And for us, masculinity is being able to kind of be centered as a man and take care of what we need to find important. But you'll always have people that are going to argue differently. And in a way, you're like, great, like you think what you want, I think what I want. And just, as long as everybody doesn't try to enforce their view on someone else, everybody's happy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, thanks so much for coming on the show. If people want to learn more about you or follow you, where can they
Yeah,
find you
great. If
online?
anybody wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, which is where I spend basically all of my social media time now, it's just Anthony Astbury. And again, it's interesting with social media because, uh, in a way, this won't surprise you, but I can post about men's personal development all day long, and you'll get medium to small amount of engagement because it's not going to go viral because it's solid content. But about once every week or two, I drop in a more fiery post, which will give one of my views on something going on in the world. And it's incredible how much more engagement that will get, So, for some people, what's funny is you won't get messages about your men's stuff. You'll get the odd message and you'll get followers. You might get 2 or 3 followers a day, but I'll put something on there about, my views on politics or about the tyrannical government or anything like that. And you will see, the graph go and spikes, and you'll have 300 followers hit you up in a day with messages. So that's always a good one for me. I like social media. I think, for me, it works well. So connect with me on there. And the website is just wholemanacademy.com. And again, there's free resources on there. There's journals. There is the quiz. It links to podcasts. So there's multiple ways to work with me for free. And then, of course, there's always the paid versions, which are, depending on what kind of budget people have and issues they have, we then work on stuff together. The biggest action you could take for fun and to be helpful is basically, if you went to the website, there's a life evaluation quiz on there, which I know over 500 men now have taken and find really helpful, because it will give you specific, memorable and achievable advice dependent on your situation. So that's always like a free starter to see how people get on, basically.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks you for being on the show. And listeners, all that stuff will be in the show notes. So you can go check that out in the description of the podcast or on our website, menstherapy.online. If you enjoyed this, do the social stuff, like, share, subscribe, you know what it is. Send it to somebody who needs to hear this conversation, right? Somebody who, just like we're talking about in the beginning of the show, has everything right on paper, but is feeling desperate or lonely or empty inside and is wanting something more. They might not quite know what that is, but they know that they need something more. I think Anthony is the guy for that. So check out his stuff. Whole Man Academy is a wonderful site. And thank you again for tuning in. We'll see you next week, another episode of the Men's Therapy Podcast.
Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. And don't forget to visit menstherapy.online to learn more about the work that we are doing to support and inspire men. Until next time, keep moving forward.